I'd tell you, but then I'd have to know. Hi, I'm Mark.
Hi, I'm Scott, and this is Church is Lame, the podcast where we try to fix the church by talking about the dumb things churches do that break the entire body. Mark, what is it that you don't know that you should know, but you can't know, but you will know?
Okay, well, this first thing is that I don't know how to depend on my husband, apparently.
Well, I think there's a reason why you don't know how to depend on your husband.
Well, you're just saying that because I have a wife. But, you
Yeah.
know, I guess the thing is that CBN thinks that that they know how a woman should depend on her husband,
Oh, dear.
but without idolizing him. See, and that's really the key point there, because, you know, if there's all that big problem that we have in this nation is women idolizing their husbands, it's a real huge problem.
Big problem.
But yeah, I know it's tragic. It's like this is like if idolizing the husband is a problem, like really you need to be writing your article towards husbands, telling them like what to do when your janky spouse idolizes you because you suck, bro.
Right.
But like this isn't my magazine that we're writing here.
Yeah. So what's happening here? What's going on?
All right, so yeah, it's just so like how to depend on your husband. Of course, nothing about husbands depending on their wives. Even people complain about the Apostle Paul. He even like wrote that stuff in there.
Right.
But it gives you these three principles, and like the first one is celebrate his gifts. The second is seek his wisdom, and three is cling to his comfort, which just sounds like an evangelical euphemism for something else.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's just because I'm dark on the inside. So,
Yeah. Wow.
and deeply broken. But yeah, I'm like, I'm like, I saw this. I'm like, this has got to be just trash. So of course I opened this article up and I'm looking through it, and it's like, yeah, okay. Celebrate your husband's gifts. Nothing stated at all about the wife's gifts.
Right.
I mean, and if you're like asking yourself, well, what about same-sex marriages? This is the Christian Broadcasting Network, so those don't really exist to them.
Like this, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but this kind of feels like the Christian version. Like when you go to the supermarket and you see like Cosmopolitan magazine or Vogue magazine.
Yeah,
like how to keep your man happy and like how to keep your man from cheating on you or whatever. This kind of feels like the Christianized version of that.
oh yeah, this is like check out aisle junk. It's like
Yeah.
if we had any Christian bookstores left in the area, like I would expect to see some bad magazine with that on the cover.
Right.
But it's like this thing like celebrate your husband's gifts. Like I like it. That's just like an absurd statement. It's like that's like how does celebrating somebody else's gifts like get you to depend on them? It doesn't even say like depend on your husband's gifts. But then it says like some janky stuff about well, like don't get jealous if somebody else's husband has a gift that yours doesn't have. And it's like, do you think women have nothing better to do than to sit around and just like passively absorb the universe as it passes by them? Because
Does this article at all like at least give us a premise about why it's important to depend on your husband? Is this important for some reason that I'm not aware of?
oh yeah, it's important for no reason stated in the article, but
Right.
which I think you and I and everybody who's listening to this probably already gets.
Because here's my thing.
Mhm.
I had a pastor once. I wouldn't call him a great pastor, but he had phenomenal catchphrases all the time. He had like a whole dictionary full of catchphrases, and one of his catchphrases that I really clung to was, "We don't fight with reality as Christians, right? Reality is reality, right?" And when I look at most functional homes, as opposed to dysfunctional, when I look at most functional homes, what I see is a husband and kids who depend on mom and wife. Like mom is really at the center of this living organism called a family. And to me, like this is really inverted to kind of well, okay, you're the guy, and throughout history, you're traditionally, the breadwinner, and you're traditionally, the image of masculinity, and you're the person who, fixes engines and fixes houses and things.
Yeah. There's a great book that I think anybody should check out. It's called Jesus and John Wayne, which is a really
Right.
good exploration of masculinity in evangelical circles. It's pretty fascinating.
Right.
But like really what it kind of comes down to is that it presents its basic thesis is that, it's complementarian, which is, that,
Yeah.
men and women are equal. It's just that men are more equal than women.
Right. Yeah.
Each has its place that neither one should like step out of their zones ever, and
Yeah.
this is like doing that exact thing, especially like the second thing here. It says seek his wisdom, and then like this section says seek his wisdom because you have none of your own, being a woman.
Right.
um
Yeah.
um and that's the worst part of it is like that really clarifies to me. It's like there's no reciprocity. Like it's not showing that marital relationship is a reciprocal relationship, which
Right.
it needs to be, whether or not you're, an egalitarian or a complementarian in your thinking,
Right.
but then it's like, yeah, your husband might not know what to do. He might not know the right thing and he might make mistakes. And like, it says nothing about how you as a woman should introduce your wisdom to your husband to help him through those times.
Yeah.
It's so perverse to me.
Yeah. And it's interesting that in all of these examples that a marriage is never
Mhm.
just the wisdom of two people. It's the wisdom of three, right? The husband, the wife, and God, right? So it's interesting that all this energy has to be given to the husband because there's this unspoken like, well, he's the head of the household, right? And there's no mention.
It does
of-
mention God, at least in this article, but not in a great way.
just as lip service. Yeah.
Like kind of, it's like what you're saying. It's like, if you get wisdom from God and your spouse is just demonstrating a lack of that wisdom, like it should be your responsibility in any kind of conception of like a relationship to introduce God's wisdom into that situation. And it doesn't even say to do that. And
Yeah.
like its third point, it says cling to his comfort, which again, like that sounds like a really bad Peer Flicks movie. Like if
Yeah.
like, I don't even know.
Oh my gosh, that's great.
Oh, but then
like the Hallmark Channel telling him.
right? But then it's like, it even says like, like if your husband isn't there for you, take all your burdens to God. And it's like, that sounds nice, except for like, you have like other support structures in life. Like there's the community of believers, your pastors, your friends, your family. Like
Yeah.
it shouldn't be this like, you can take when you need comfort, go to your husband or to God, but nowhere else. Because that's kind of what it
Right.
reads like. I don't know if that's what they
Yeah.
intended, but that's how it was written.
Yeah, yeah. I forgot. I have a friend in Indiana who's a pastor, and he's really wise. I mean, he's about our age, right? But for his age, he's extremely wise. And one of the things that he likes to talk about is how in the church we have the unacceptable sins, right?
Mhm.
That don't murder, don't lie, those things. But we have this culture of secret sins, where as long as on Sunday morning you look like you have it together, like things like alcoholism or spousal abuse, as long as you keep those things nice and tucked away, nobody will mention them. And this
Right.
feels like somebody trying to take those things that we don't talk about them and talk about them and like really flub the job,
Yeah, it kind of like pointing back to that article we did a while back was like, like always be happy or some nonsense like that.
Yeah, like this to me reads, I believe it's written by a woman, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yes, so this is written by Lauren Washer. And Lauren, I don't mean to rake you across the coals, but what this reads like is kind of like, I am utterly codependent on my spouse in an unhealthy way,
Mhm.
and I needed an outlet to write about it, but I couldn't write about it anywhere else except this Christian outlet. So now I needed to,
Yeah.
like I had to filter it.
Like you had to try to
Yeah.
convince yourself that everything was okay.
Yeah, like it really reads as kind of like somebody who's actually not doing quite well as they need to be.
Yeah, because it feels like a bunch of like self-justifying nonsense into like accepting a horribly imbalanced patriarchal attitude toward your own relationships.
Yep.
Because like I'm sorry, but like you should not, unless what you are communicating to an individual is specifically dependent on their biological gender. Okay. And so that is to say, if it has something to do with your physiology, then if it's a relationship, you need to be addressing both members of that relationship. You can't just
Yeah.
single out, well, women should behave like this and men should behave like this. Aside from that prescriptive nonsense, because that doesn't work for everybody anyway,
Yeah.
right? Like how you and your wife get on is not how me and my wife get on. If I tried to
Right.
do things exactly the way you did, I would damage my relationship and vice versa. I think that's going to be true for most people. So there's like this highly prescriptive craziness and like self-convincing nonsense. It's very frustrating. And I think you're very right to point out like that whole secret sin thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like you're trying to maintain this outward appearance, which kind of takes us back to, Hillsong, who we've talked about several times before.
Hillsong.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
But it's like recently they just cannot get away from scandal, because recently a former employer or the former employee of the church was suing the church for various reasons related to those other scandals, but then also claimed that the church had moved around millions of dollars to avoid oversight from government regulators.
Of course.
Now, of course, this is just alleged at this point, but
Right.
unfortunately, with the other things that we've seen, like this seems like a reasonable thing to believe that Hillsong had done. I mean,
Right.
especially in that way that, you had, Brian Houston for all these years trying to act outwardly as if everything is great, everything is fine, everything is perfect.
Right. Yeah, here's the deal. We have been raking Hillsong across the coals across several episodes, and I totally mean to, right? That this is a church network that has been fleecing its members of money for decades, that have been working solely to their own financial enrichment for decades. And it seems like, well, let me back up. There's a reason why you don't try to plug holes in the dam when you know the dam is going to break.
Right.
Right? Because the dam is going to break anyway. And the more people you try to put their fingers in holes trying to plug the holes, the more people you're going to hurt along the way. Right? And so now we see it's not just Brian Houston. It's not just his wife. It's not just his minions at the highest level who, after all the punishment is doled out, they're still going to be fine. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Now we see that, crap runs downhill. And now we see that this is going to affect people, up and down the employment chain, up and down the volunteer chain, up and down, the quote unquote oversight chain, what little oversight they have, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like this story is actually a little bit complex because it's got a lot of moving parts, right? Like you said, there's kind of like this international accounting espionage thing of how do you creatively move money around so you don't have to pay taxes, yet you can put as much of it into your pockets as you possibly can, right?
Yeah. Like last night, we had a meeting and there we were talking to a pastor, and that pastor was saying that like in his church, how like there were things that like he, like no matter what his, elder board or whatever you want to call it, would do, he's like, no, I will not get involved in these things.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just no, because like, I don't want there to be even the smallest appearance that there could be a problem. Like,
Yep.
he's that's being that proactive. And it's like, maybe he listened to our podcast. I don't know.
If only.
But it's like,
Right.
there's an example of a pastor that's looking for that kind of oversight and accountability, and that we are calling for.
Yep. Absolutely. And so that's just layer one. Layer one is these people trying to take advantage of everybody else. And then layer two is, okay, well, now you have this staff of people who love the church, who want to be on board with the mission. And now you're asking them to put themselves, to make themselves vulnerable to things like legal attacks, to being put in jail.
Right.
Because you're asking them to lie for you, to lie on behalf of your finances. Somebody has to sign that piece of paper saying that I certify that I have checked the books and everything's, every square is a square and every circle is a circle. But it's not
Yeah.
Brian Houston signing that document. It's this former employee who's now, who knows what's going to happen to their lives.
Yeah, and within any organization, there's always going to be some silly buggers when it comes to the accounting.
Hmm.
Uh, and apologies if the phrase "silly buggers" is offensive in your English context, but it's not in mine.
Right.
But like having worked in church accounting for years, right? Like I saw some things that's like, oh, we were doing that wrong.
Yep. Oops.
Whoopsie.
Yeah.
Because it happens, like any organization,
Yeah.
like you can have something that goes down where it's like, oh, we didn't realize that was this because we interpreted that tax code this way, like it can
Right.
happen.
Yep.
But like these allegations,
Yeah.
for how they're allocating their money, yeah, that's not like a whoopsie situation. That's like a what you're doing thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then like the third thing is like it's not just creative accounting, right? Like, oh, we're going to put money offshore so we don't have to pay taxes on it. Like every business does that, right? And I don't think the church should have to play by a different set of tax laws, right? The tax law is the tax law. And
Right.
so you read the law and you do your best to comply with it, right?
Mhm.
So if a church wants to put its money offshore, then okay, whatever. Like I would prefer that the church, use that money somehow, like you said, feed the hungry, clothe the naked, house the homeless, all that kind of stuff. That's how I would prefer churches use money. But that's not the way the modern world works. Now we have retirement planning and all sorts of investment opportunities and putting money away to plant churches in the future. There's all sorts of reasons to have, a reserve of money sitting in a pile somewhere, so whatever, but that's not what happens here. What happens here is every time there seems to be a big wad of money laying around, it seems to end up in somebody's pocket, right? And that's definitely not the way God intended the tithe to be used, was so that very specific individuals at the top of the chain would just get richer and richer and richer over time, and
Yeah. And we've already talked about like the severity of a lack of accountability to the various, places in the body.
yeah,
And like maybe pivoting back again, right? Because we talked about, the Southern Baptist Conference and like their problems with that whole sex abuse scandal and just power abuse and like, like a 288-page report that talked about like 700 recorded complaints.
recorded. Yes, that's the important word there. Recorded claims. Yep.
And then even now, and unfortunately we don't have any more details, but just as kind of
Yeah.
like an interjection to this story, right? It's like they're now being investigated by the Department of Justice.
Because of course.
Like, and it may have to do with, the previous abuse scandals. It may be something entirely new. We have no idea because the Department of Justice isn't going to just tell us and, outright until they
Yeah.
start actual indictments. If they start actual indictments. So it's like, when you don't have that accountability, this is the kind of thing that can happen.
Right.
Like no church wants to be investigated by the Department of Justice.
Exactly. So people get TV has destroyed us. Let me put it that way. So we watch Law and Order, or we watch West Wing, or any one of these legal dramas,
Yeah.
and it seems like the Department of Justice and district attorneys' offices, it seems they work lightning quick. Like a policeman just kind of walks into their office with a piece of evidence, and all of a sudden we're arresting people left and right.
Yeah.
And that's not the way it works. Like this is especially pertinent now that Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago has been raided, right? Like, oh, it's a conspiracy. It's a conspiracy. No, you don't understand how glacially slow government entities work.
Right, like-
Nobody's serving up subpoenas or starting investigations unless they were already 99% sure that the case was locked down.
Yeah, because like this situation, like the Mar-a-Lago thing, right? Like that goes back to, last year, January.
Yeah.
It's like, that's how long it took for this to happen. It's like, because of that glacial slowness.
Yeah. And like, from my point of view, that glacial slowness is a bit of a problem, right? The justice system, while I think it should be blind, it'd be nice if they used like a walking stick or something, to maybe help the process along a little bit.
Like one of the walking sticks with like the sword inside or like a hidden musket or something.
Yeah. So what's is there any more detail? Like I know there's not a lot of detail, but what like is there anything at all more to grab onto with this SPC story?
Like, yeah, see, that's the problem. Like there isn't.
So it's this stupid vocabulary that we keep using. Like, oh, these we don't make mistakes anymore. We're new. We're reformed. We got our act together.
Mhm.
All those mistakes are in the past. But like like next year there's going to be 100 new complaints, right? And
I'd
so
like
it
to
just
hope not.
right. It drives me nuts that we keep creating this language of present day perfection.
Hmm.
That's not the gospel. The gospel is that we are in our present form sinners. We are broken and we are in need of a savior. And that savior comes to us in the form of Christ Jesus, right? And so this vocabulary of present perfection actually works against the job we're trying to do, which is trying to tell people how, star spangled cool Jesus is,
Yeah, and
Drives me
I think
nuts.
a big problem with that too is like I guess like the kind of the flip side of it, that language of present perfection. Which I mean, for those of us who don't accept the possibility of present perfection, it's already absurd. But
Right.
it can lead to you going, well, I'm doing everything right, in scare quotes, and that can lead you toward a path of then you know like sanctifying the stuff you're doing because you're doing it for the kingdom or whatever,
Right.
when it may not actually be good in and of itself. Like the thing you're doing could be just outright evil, but you justify it in your head because, well, I'm not intending it for evil, so therefore it must be good, kind of a thing. Like
Right.
I think that's a problem with that way of thinking. If you're aware that we will never achieve current perfection, then it puts you in a place to be on the lookout constantly for it. And then the other side, I think, of like that permanent or that present perfection language is that, like, if you do anything that is evidence of not having that, then it's like automatically your faith or your salvation are kind of called into question, which is not healthy either. But
Right. It's absurd that we go to that place.
like the church needs a lot of reform, and they acknowledge that they need that reform,
Yeah.
but like a day late and a dollar short,
Several days late. Well,
many dollars
I
short.
yeah, I think part of what this I mean, I don't know if you can class action lawsuit a denomination, but I think
Well, yeah.
money's going to be going a lot of different directions here pretty shortly to once again settle to keep people from testifying.
Yeah, and I don't know where the SBC is going to end up after all this.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not the only denomination right now having its challenges,
Yeah.
but
It's just sad. It's just sad. This does. I don't think this is an American thing, although I don't have a lot of perspective to say otherwise. It seems to be the human condition. We seem to like have this block at the front of our brain that we don't understand how powerful it is to have a testimony that is broken, right?
mhm.
To have a testimony that says, yes, we had a pastor who sexually assaulted a kid. And you know what? We dealt with it immediately. We dealt with it severely. Like we didn't take time to like, can we believe the child? Can we believe the mom? Like we didn't do that. Like we dealt with it. And if this guy wants to come back and sue us, like we will deal with that separately. But we believe, what the Bible has to say about protecting our young people, and that is not up for debate, and it's not going to be hidden from view just because it's embarrassing. We just don't seem to have that instinct in us, and that's really a shame.
Yeah. So I'm gonna like hard pivot us out of this one
Okay.
into something a little more. I'm not even sure what to call this.
Yeah, I'm not even sure how to characterize this one.
Okay, so this individual, her name is Nelson. I didn't write down her freaking first name like a dummy. Well, hey, there you go. Quality, top shelf journalism only here, folks.
Yeah,
Oh,
Sophia Nelson.
Sophia, thank you. So she, was working at a university, and she had made a tweet in 2021 about how they were DC Comics was screwing up by quote unquote sexualizing Superman by making him bisexual.
Okay.
And then she was eventually basically just harassed out of her job.
Oh, interesting.
And she's a Christian,
Yeah.
so we're not just picking on like some rando who just happened to have this opinion. Yes, she is a rando that has this opinion, but she's a rando Christian that has this opinion.
Okay.
And, you know, if you've ever read comic books, you know how stupid that statement is. Because like, first of all, like CBN's biggest problem with this is that, she was canceled.
Yeah.
No, it says that she was, let me see, what's the exact language that I had here, that she was driven out of the university. Not that she was terminated or let go, but she was driven out. So that coded language means she left of her own accord because she couldn't handle it anymore.
Right.
Because she had voiced a deeply unpopular view, and people were like, "No, I don't want that person at my alma mater because that's garbage."
Right.
So she was driven out for having an unpopular opinion. Congratulations. You, Mrs. Christian, are in the minority of how some people think about some things.
Yeah. Welcome to free markets.
Yeah, right. It's like it's the marketplace of ideas, unless people don't want to buy what you're selling, and then it's like, oh, what's going on? Like the world's all broken and sinful.
Yeah.
But I just like this thing, like, and I've heard this argument before, right? People complain about, how you make a new superhero that's gay, or you make an existing superhero it comes out as gay or bisexual or something. And then it's like all of a sudden this complaint of, well, you're sexualizing these superheroes. It's like, no, Superman's sexuality has always been front and center.
Yeah.
Like since the very first Action Comics back in the day.
Right.
He has this like, that's very stereotypical, like, he's very muscular, has this very stereotypically male, masculine jaw. You have Lois Lane, who is always swooning over him, but not swooning over Clark Kent.
Right.
Superman's sexuality is been at the front and center of that storytelling. Like there is no Superman without Lois Lane in any sensible way, until the recent times.
Right.
He's been sexualized. Nearly every other comic book character, especially like look at how let's look at how we have characters like Supergirl, who should be Superwoman. Well, let's just face it.
Right.
You have Catgirl, who should be Catwoman. They're always girls. Notice that,
Yeah.
Like I'm being weird now.
Yeah. You kind of.
But it's like, look at their costumes. They are always sexualized more than the male characters.
Right.
So it's like her problem is not that Superman is suddenly being sexualized. It's that he's suddenly not being heterosexualized.
Right. So I'm not on the fence about this because I agree with you, but just as a matter of counterpoint,
all right,
it's a comic book. And the amount of time and energy that mostly grown men, but grown-ups give to comic books and defending the portrayal of the characters, when once again, we are in the midst of one of the most turbulent political times in my life, and nobody can be bothered to get out and vote, but the pajama Hadeen, click. How dare you talk about like a new version of Superman? How dare you try to take him down with your old fashioned thinking? It's like, do human beings really not have anything better to do than getting cats fights on the internet about superheroes? I find it kind of exhausting and silly.
Yeah, and it really is.
Yeah.
But having an appreciation for comic books, although I'm not a comic book guy.
Yeah.
It's like I can get why, because you have some of these plot lines that are just so twisted and insane, right? Like it's basically a soap opera in like print.
Yeah.
And that's really what comic books are. And if you don't think a comic book is a soap opera, then go watch a soap opera for a season and then tell me.
Yeah.
But it's like people can get really precious about the characters, and I get that. But it's like not even somebody like complaining about DC taking a direction that doesn't make sense, culturally or contextually in the story. It's just that, oh, I'm just noticing Superman's sexuality all of a sudden, and that's a problem.
Right.
And that's the thing. Like, I think that like the lesson we need to take away from this is that, as Christians, actually, I don't even want to say as Christians, just as humans, if you are so accustomed to the status quo, it can become kind of invisible to you.
Mm-hmm.
And so the moment that like it's like, it's like a T-Rex, right? The moment it moves and we can see it, you know, going back to, Jurassic Park, right? It's like, if it doesn't move, you can't see it. Well, here it is. Something in the culture moved and just got our, this woman's attention. And in any aspects of our life, whether politically, religiously, educationally, however, it's like we have all these different areas of our life that if something has been too stagnant in front of us for too long, we stop seeing it. And then when
Yeah.
we do see it, we don't have a right to complain, because the problem is that we should have been moving. If we would have been moving, it would have been like, something we would have noticed. But it's when we
Yeah.
stagnate and it stagnates that it's like, oh, all of a sudden it's a problem. It's like, no, it's that you haven't been keeping up with reality,
Yeah.
and I think that's like, it's an important thing, like as Christians, that we need to be constantly reshifting our focus and how we are looking at the world around us. Or else, like, something that's always been there that maybe we should have been, bothered by,
Mm-hmm.
like we should have been calling out, like now I'm calling it out. Well, you've kind of lost the moral high ground on that. But, or in a case
Yeah.
like this, it's like, it's not like she was complaining about them having like sex scenes with Batman. So it's like, you're complaining about the exact thing that's always been there. You just don't
Yeah.
like this version of it. It's like, well, we shouldn't, like, if you don't think that we should be throwing, like forcing sexuality onto kids, then you shouldn't be forcing heterosexual sexuality on kids either.
Right.
And so it's like, I just want to say that, just like, we need to just shift our perspectives and make sure we're seeing things for what they actually are.
Yeah, totally. That'll preach.
All right.
Nice. Okay. We do have an incredible online community, and we had some interesting comments over the last 7 days. We had a discussion. I forget if it was 1 or 2 episodes ago,
Mhm.
but we had a discussion about bringing guns into the church, and you in particular felt really strongly that the church was a sacred space. The church building is a sacred space, and that guns have no place in there. And we got a question from Sarah Lockridge. Is a building truly a sacred space? It's just a building.
Well, Sarah, I'm going to answer you this way.
Be nice.
Yeah,
Be
it's
nice.
yeah, no, I'm going to be nice.
Okay.
So like, there's nothing inherent to a structure that would impart some kind of sacredness to it. So like, a plot of land that you play golf on is not sacred. If I bury somebody there, does that make it a cemetery? It might, but it's like, you have to kind of look at how it's being used. In the events of something like a normal cemetery or a church, you have a space that is being consecrated for the use of holy things, of worship
Yeah.
and prayer. And, some churches don't have their own building, like a lot of churches, a lot of what we call plant churches, they might be meeting in somebody's home. And that's just a house people live in, but, or they might be meeting in like a gym at a school or at a country club or something, that has or a hotel that has a conference area. So those spaces in that time are basically, they're consecrated for that use of worship and prayer. And so like in that time, they become a short-term sacred space. It's not about the physical location. It's about what it's being, consecrated for.
Mm.
So hopefully that makes it clear. So when we talk about, I talk about, a church being a sacred place, I really mean like the church functioning as, a place of worship.
Right.
Like if it were just like a Tuesday afternoon and you're coming to drop off a package and you got a gun in your belt, like I really don't have that problem there, right?
Yeah.
It's just like, but when you're coming here and consecrating it for that use of prayer and worship, like that's what I mean by it becoming a sacred space.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't have. Let me just say this. I think one of the most beautiful word pictures in the Bible is the word picture of like we look at the creation story, and in our modern English, God said this, and God said this,
Mhm.
and God said this. But the essence of that really is that God breathed these things into existence. It was the breath of God, right? And so, if it is the breath of God that makes everything that is real, then everything that is real is of God, and in my mind, in my heart, therefore sacred, right?
Yeah, that's a very
And
mystical viewpoint of it. That I mean, I'm
right,
not like saying that as a way of deriding it. I'm so
right,
saying that like that is a very common mystical way of looking at the
right.
world. Like,
But all that to say that it is a very helpful tool for me to perform a daily self evaluation. Do I treat my kids like they're sacred to me? Do I
mhm.
treat my wife like she's sacred to me? Do I treat my friends? Do I treat Mark as if he's sacred to me? Do I treat my holy spaces like my church? Am I like these things that I call important to me? Do I treat them that way, or am I just giving it lip service? And so that kind of that word picture helps me to create a system of self accountability.
Dig it.
Yeah, totally. All right, and super happy to announce new subscriber.
Ooh.
So on YouTube, we actually have the ability to see who's following us and subscribing to us. If they decide to flip on that switch, hey, make it known, make it public that I'm following. So new subscriber on YouTube, can't flip for ship. That's pretty clever. I like that.
That's an awesome name.
Yeah.
I
So
like.
we
I feel like there's a story behind it. Like I want to hear.
absolutely might have to click over there to see what's going on. Hey, we want to hear from you. So if you're watching this video or if you're within the sound of our voice, click those buttons. Like us and subscribe and ring the bell so that so you get notifications about new episodes. If you're listening to podcasts, give us a review on your favorite podcast player. And if you need to get a hold of us immediately, by all means, send an email to churcheslanepodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, and especially email us about how you have been harassing, not physically, but just generally harassing Rob Bell to come on our podcast.
Speaking of ringing bells,
Hmm.
nice, very nice transition there. Have you ever seen the episode of Jimmy Fallon where he brings on Bruce Springsteen to sing "Ring My Bell"?
No, and I'm horrified by the thought of it.
Oh my gosh, Sam, if you're watching, like this would be a great place to like just insert like 5 seconds of Bruce Springsteen going "Ring My Bell."
Oh my, I can't deal with that.
Yes, there are some things that shouldn't be, and then some things that shouldn't be, but become magical when they do come into being, and that's one of them.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go watch Happy Tree Friends just to cleanse my mind. And if
I
you don't
can't
know what,
unhear that.
and if you don't know what Happy Tree Friends is, it's not safe for children. Go watch it. It's amazing.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And with that bit of heathening out of the way, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.